This is Why You're Wrong with Gregg Dietz.
All right, folks. Today I got legitimately pissed off because Jason Schreier of Kotaku, he put out this long article, literally 1,500 words, about the state of BioWare in Anthem. Now, normally, whatever. I would have ignored it and moved on with my life. But the problem here is that everybody was fucking talking about it. Because the issue that I have here isn't that they want to talk about Anthem. It isn't that they want to bash Anthem. What the fuck ever. Not everyone's going to enjoy the game. Everyone's going to fucking, whatever the new thing. It's sensationalism that pisses me off. There's an old phrase in press, which is, if it bleeds, it leads. Meaning that if it was like a murder or a homicide or a suicide or something political, it went front. It was front page. It was the first story that was on the news. That's what if it bleeds, it leads means. There's a new age of that. And that's, hey, everyone's piling on BioWare. There's something there. So let's fucking concentrate on that. Oh, fuck. EA just laid off 350 people. Let's shit on that and concentrate on that too much. That's my problem. The if it bleeds, it leads of this generation. Now, to further this idea, and I'm going to outright say it. MSNBC, CNN, and Fox News are what? Anthony, answer this question for me. What are those three organizations?
News organizations.
Wrong. They are pundit outlets. All they stand for is allowing pundits to spew their bullshit fucking opinion on TV. Whether it's liberal, whether it's conservative. Doesn't matter. It's a pundit. Nobody should be listening to pundits because all it is vile opinion. I'm not talking about fun opinion, and there's a few shows that do have a good opinion, but it's always way too biased and way too vile. Guess what IGN, Kotaku, Polygon, and GameSpot are, Anthony? Pundit outlets. You cannot read an article from them that's news without getting some fucking opinion or agenda based on it. This irritates the living shit out of me because it fuels assholes like Jim Sterling, like Angry Joe. It needs to stop. It really needs to end. But I say that, and I know full well, Anthony, that it won't end because people will still gravitate towards it. People will still read it. This is why If It Bleeds, It Leads exists. It doesn't exist because news organizations just want to put that out there. It's because it's what people read. It's what people go to. So the press has to pander to pay the bills. Right? So if a publisher fucks up, if a development company fucks up, the press goes, hey, we're going to get a lot more clicks if we post this one than if we don't. So who do we blame? Do we blame the dev for being bad? For pushing things, for delaying things, for not communicating properly with their team? Do we blame the publisher for pushing deadlines and listening to investors more than the audience? Do we listen to the press who is pushing an agenda, who is trying to pay the bills? Do we stop the fans or try to convince the fans to not read this vile shit? What do? We can't do anything. This Why You're Wrong is less about why you're wrong and more about what's wrong with fucking media right now. It's a legit problem that we can't find news organizations, or at least in a big format, that just tell the news. I don't hate Jason Schreier. As a matter of fact, the article's interesting. But the problem with the article, and a lot of what I noticed in it, is something that I've seen journalists do in the past that irritates the shit out of me. He claims to have talked to 19 people at BioWare, ex-employees, who worked on or around Anthem. And all he does is he quotes them by saying a BioWare employee. Nobody is cited in that whole fucking article. That is bullshit. It's nonsense. How am I supposed to trust Jason Schreier? Because he works for Polygon? Because he wrote a book? I'm taking everything that he wrote in that article with a grain of salt. Now, on the other hand, BioWare, the fuck are you thinking by releasing a goddamn fucking 3-paragraph thing going, nothing's wrong here, everything's A-okay? You're not helping. Nobody believes that shit. Nobody fucking believes that shit. Not for a second. So that's my problem, Anthony. That's why I've been chomping at the bit to talk about this, because it's a legit problem right now. With social media, with the ability to create a website and do whatever you want, you can report on whatever you want. Everybody has a fucking soapbox nowadays. And it sucks. Like, I'm glad that you and I do this podcast. I'm glad you gave me this soapbox right here. But at the end of the day, I never agree with anybody else's fucking soapbox antics. Because, I mean, not all the time. There's some things I do agree with. But it frustrates the living shit out of me that people can't tell the difference between a attention-grabbing headline and actual clickbait. It bothers the shit out of me that people don't take things with a grain of salt. They just take everything as fucking-batum. They can't read articles from IGN or Polygon, or like Polygon had a fucking article the other day about why they were not happy with the Borderlands 3 trailer. Yeah, I didn't fucking agree with it either. Let's move on. Who cares? It's an opinion. But everyone's, Polygon's the worst in gaming journalism. You're fucking stupid. Like, full on, you're an idiot if you said that shit. And the other issue is it comes down to, like, dieting. Let's say, like, oh, well, if I just stop eating food, I could lose weight. Well, I can't just stop eating food because I have to keep energy going into my body. I have to keep my metabolism going. So I have to ingest food to keep going. So it's this catch-22. Same with game journalism. We need game journalism to keep things accountable, to let people know what's going on in the world. But the other side of that is that, again, these companies can post whatever they want. So we have punditry out the ass. And it's just too much. It's just too much. I don't know why the gaming industry needs to beat this dead horse. Look, Anthem, little bit of a failure. Clearly not that big of a failure because it sold enough. But unfortunately, because everyone wants to beat this dead horse, the investors saw that shit. Started pulling money away from EA. EA saw that that was going to be a problem in the next quarter and laid off 350 people. There's a ripple effect with this shit. A absolute butterfly effect that happens when you choose to read sensationalist news organizations. Whether it's gaming, movies, comic books, politics, it's a problem. And I know that our audience is not big. And I know that our audience is awesome. I'm glad you guys are listening. But at the end of the day, you gotta do what my dad has told me since I was a kid. Believe none of what you read and only half of what you see. And then that way, you're skeptical. That way, when somebody like Jason Schreier writes a 1,500 word article and doesn't cite anything that's noteworthy, you can walk away with a grain of salt going, maybe some of that was real and some of it wasn't. So that's it. There's no why you're wrong. There's no fucking at the end of a goddamn movie moral lesson to fucking take away from this that I can really give you. It's just something that's been eating at me. Today was the straw that broke the camel's back. I was going to talk about something entirely, but then that article came out and I saw everyone's reaction. I really love Jesse Cox and respect him, but he just read that and was just like, BioWare's in a crisis. And I'm just like, okay, so you just fucking took it verbatim. Cool, Jesse. Neat. Great. So.
And that's why you're, well, and that was Gregg's segment. I can't say that's why you're wrong. So that was Gregg's segment. So this is the part, you know how in every political debate, like somebody, like the one political party does like their speech, and then like right afterwards you have like the other political party kind of say like, oh, this is our thoughts, reactions, and yada yada. I forgot what's called, but so what I will say to what you said, Gregg, which surprised me because I totally thought when we were before you had the discussion or your segment, like I totally had a different mind of what you're gonna do with this segment.
Yeah, I was curious, where did you think I was gonna go?
I thought you were like going to hate on Jason Schreier, like hate this article's bashing on Anthem, and like we need to stop this and all that. I thought you were gonna go in that direction, which you kind of did, but not full on.
No, I think that, like I said, I think that that the article is very well written, very well structured. It flows nicely, but there needs to be an accountability situation when it comes to reading that kind of stuff. You have to take everything with a grain of salt in that article. Like, I guarantee you some of that is as factual, and I guarantee you some of it is not. Jason did his due diligence. He did his work. And for that, I respect the shit out of him. But man, I read that and I just went, you started off the article, the first paragraph is making it sound like it was a bad thing that the title got changed. Come on, dude. Like, you set the tone outright. And I knew where the article was going. And there's a whole fucking paragraph diatribe part where he just is like, is this the problem? Is that the problem? 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 Like, I'm not kidding. Like, if you read it, there's a whole fucking part where he does that because it's a writing, a journalistic writing technique to pad your article. And I see that too often when it comes to this kind of stuff, Anthony, where there's a sense of pandering. There's a sense of what do people want to hear, which is totally something they teach you in journalism school. But at the end of the day, I just can't subscribe to that kind of way of thinking. And I think too many people, Anthony, look at that and they just go, they look at that article and they don't question it. Somebody will pick up a newspaper. Who am I talking? Somebody will open up Twitter.
Right.
And they'll see some headline that says, oh, the riots yesterday or the stampede that happened yesterday at Nipsey Hussle's memorial was caused by some guy with an AK-47. Nobody knows why the fucking, I haven't looked into it, but at the time, nobody knew. But there's going to be people who read that and believe it and then immediately say it. And it bothers me. It legit bothers me because that's not how we as a people should be. We should be way more we should just be questioning the media that we get, the stuff that we get. You said the other day, Anthony, that you need to question me more on my opinion on the show.
Yep.
And what did I say? I was like, please. Because that's how it works. If we want to get to the bottom of things, if we want to get to the facts of things, we can't just take one person's thing as fucking concrete.
And you're right.
Fact.
And you're absolutely right. Like the one thing I wanted to add or wanted to say, or my mind is thinking before you did this segment today, is that you're completely right, and we do need to question things. We do need to ask where'd you get that information from, like yada yada yada. When it comes to Jason Schreier and his article he wrote, one of the things I wanted to point out is like, this is just me assuming, but that's only because of what you know. Take it with a grain of salt for what I'm about to say, because I did take a journalism class first year of college, so using that bit of knowledge I have in there.
That's
Um,
funny.
but I wanted to point out that maybe the reason why Jason didn't name drop, the 19 people that he interviewed or that was in the articles, maybe because those people that wanted to be interviewed didn't want to put their names in like full on in the article for career or whatever reasons they may have be. And often used as an anonymous source, or still say they're BioWare employees but not full on names. And the other thing I wanted to say was, um, you know, we're never so like if like these stories need to be told one way or another, and there's always two sides of a story. The thing is though is that with this situation with Anthem, are we really going to hear what happened with the game, from EA,
Ultimate,
from BioWare? Are they really going to say everything what happened, works and all? They're not.
ultimately, Anthony, the takeaway from this is there is, and we've seen it, clearly a problem with AAA development. I should say AAA development. There is an issue, and I think the best solution to this issue, because whether or not those, let's say all 19 were true, there are literally hundreds of people that work in BioWare. So that's a very small percentage of people who work there. And maybe those 19 people had just really bad experiences, right? If you talk to my mom and you talk to me about working in Walmart, because we work there at the same time, you're going to get two different accounts. You're going to get two different opinions. My experience was garbage. Her experience was great. So that's my point, is that's why let's say all 19 of those stories that he put in there are true, right?
Mm-hmm.
Benefit of the doubt. There are still a ton of people that work there that probably don't feel that way. You have to keep that in mind. They're like, just by sheer fucking odds, Anthony, there has to be. Because if, at the end of the day, let's say 3/4 of that workforce was that unhappy, they could strike. Easily, they could strike. Now, of course, there'd be scabs that get brought in, all that jazz, but whatever, that's besides the point. The point that I'm making is that you have to keep that in mind, that there has to be a bunch of people there that do not feel the same way as those 19 people. But if there is that kind of tension, that kind of problem with AAA development, the best way to handle this is to unionize game development.
Absolutely.
Because it'll eliminate any problems.
Absolutely. Which, funny enough, that was actually one of the things I saw on Twitter today. It's like voice actors were coming out and hashtagging support devs, because the talk of game unionization has been much more apparent this year, especially, and have become much more of a growing thing. And I hope it happens, and I hope that things like a union comes in, and if the case, if the situation is as real as it states in Jason Schreier's article, that things like that would not happen in the future if a union is involved in some degree.
It's going to be really hard and really messy to get an organization like that going, because there's actually a couple groups that have been working on it for years now, so it's not like it's not around the corner. But the biggest hurdle coming from that, Anthony, is you have to set it up properly to where the unions work with the higher ups. There has to be an even working ground.
Yeah.
And if things get unionized the way that I hope they do, where like you can only work in the industry if you're unionized, much like with the voice actors or Actors Guild, there's going to be a lot of times where game development, like we're not going to see a game, like we might hear about a game and then we won't see it for another 4 years. Game development will probably be, I don't want to say doubled, but damn near.
Yeah.
So
we'll see.
I'm just saying, like,
we'll see.
Like it's we're gonna see a lot of like if it happens, we're gonna see a lot of people getting angrier and angrier because these certain games aren't coming out or whatever. But as I pointed out before on this podcast, as you've pointed on this podcast, there's so many fucking games to play that if you broaden what you want to play and how you want to play games, you're never going to be bored.
Agreed.
There's always something to play, whether it's indie, AAA. There's always something to play.